Every night, millions upon millions of baby boomers are fretting about the threat of eviction, or they're living the reality of homelessness. In today's show, I'll be shedding some light on this ever growing epidemic, some of the reasons as to why it's happening, and ideas from governments in terms of their solutions. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Bibreen Samuels, and you're here at the Smart Years, a place where baby boomers can reinvent, thrive, and live well into their third act of life. So you've seen the headlines, you've heard them, but also when you walk down your high streets, every high street virtually has a community of people who are living on the streets. And invariably, they are people who are in their 50s and their 60s, and dare I say it, their 70s. Now, there was research carried out by the University of Sydney by Professor Myra Hamilton. And what she found is that 1 in 6 baby boomers don't actually own property. So that's millions of us. I'm one of the 1 in 6. Now, when you've owned property and you've paid off your mortgage, you have a sense of stability, home security as you continue to age. We're living longer. So we're living into our 80s, 90s, and comfortably into our hundreds. So if you don't have that, that's where this instability arises. What she also found is that from a gender point of view, it tends to be women who are 55 and over who face homelessness in greater numbers than men. So if you think about these figures and the research that she's come up with, what it does, it debunks this whole idea that we as baby boomers are this cash rich generation that's swimming around in, dollars and sterling and euros. It's just not the case. Maybe the top 1 to 2% of high net worth individuals, they fall into that category, but the majority of us, the 98%, certainly do not. Now, how do you find yourself in this position? You might be thinking, well, there's a whole host of reasons. It could start with the fact that you're somebody who's in your 60s, you have a huge mountain of debt, you still have quite a sizable mortgage. So you're attempting to pay off your mortgage, you pay down your debt, but you've got insecurity in terms of the world of work. As much as there is this phrase bandied about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is it a myth? Is it a reality? Only you decide. But what we do know is a reality is that ageism faces older people in greater numbers as we continue to age. And there is ageism within the workplace. And as much as there's legislation that says that we shouldn't discriminate in terms of age when we're looking for work, the reality is, which from our own lived experience tells us, that you can't mandate people, you can't mandate decision makers to employ older people. If they're enlightened, they will do. If they're not, they won't. So that's a reality. So if you're an older person who has this mountain of debt and you can't find work, then you're going to turn to, like the majority of us, or some of us have turned to, the solopreneur journey, the one person business, for example. But what we do recognize is when we take this journey, given the fact that we're living longer, so that's a good thing on one hand. But on the other hand, it's a sense that we recognize we're going to have to continue working well into our 70s, maybe even into our 80s. Because if we're clearing those debts, for those of you who do have, debts and mortgage, that's one thing, but we're living longer. And because we have insufficient savings, or we don't have a pension, or we might have a few £1,000s swirling around in a bank account somewhere, we recognize that's insufficient money to see us through the next 2 to 3 decades. And so we step into the arena of solopreneurship, knowing that we'll be working well into our 70s. But there are other reasons why we are stepping into this arena of homelessness. Because for many of us, we could be literally one illness away from homelessness, one illness away from eviction. Now, if you live in America, for example, where you have exorbitant costs when it comes to healthcare costs, and you have an illness that is life-threatening, for example, then any resources you have is going to pay for your health costs. But in the meantime, you could actually be losing your home. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason could be divorce. What we're seeing is this growing trend whereby there's something called the grey divorce. where baby boomers are divorcing in their 60s. You know, they've lived a life with somebody and they've woken up to, or they've always known that it's time for this to come to an end, and so divorce happens. And in the divorce, you might lose out, you'll lose your home, for example, and you may be the spouse that doesn't have very much money, so homelessness again. Then it could be a case of investments. Now, for many people, property has been the sort of pension guarantee. And let's say that you bought a property portfolio of, let's say, four properties, and you bought them at the height of the market. I don't know whether that's the bear market, the bull market, but you know what I mean. You bought it at the height of the market. So it looked like a really favorable investment. But we've been through some highs and we've been through some lows over the last 14 or so years. And so what was then seen as something very favorable, along the way, there's been, you know, a rise in inflation and mortgage costs and the maintenance of the home, that actually you're sitting on a pile of losses. So instead of generating profit for you every month, it's actually generating a loss. You may then have no choice but to sell the property. So what was then seen as your pension, your golden egg, you now don't have one. So there's a multiple of reasons as to why many baby boomers, and you know, it could happen to any one of us, are literally living on the streets. So there was data from the University of California in San Francisco. And what it reveals is the fact that over 40% of people in California and San Francisco, over 40% are homeless. And they are people in their 50s, 60s, and sadly 70s. That's quite a chilling number. 40% of the population literally lives on the street. And what they also found is that it's the first time that these people have faced homelessness. So, you know, as we're moving into more advanced ages, people are struggling with this reality. So we've got 40% of homelessness in California and San Francisco. But what are some of the governments doing around the world? Well, here in the UK, we've just had an election about a month ago, or just under a month ago. So we've got a new Labour government, and some of the ideas that they're putting forward in terms of tackling this homelessness is they want to launch a cross-governmental strategy where they're going to bring the different parties together, and the whole idea is to eliminate homelessness and look at previous successes. I think that's going to be a little bit challenging for them because the last 14 years we've had a Tory government, and actually what we've seen is a rise in the visibility of homelessness since the Tories have been in. Thank goodness they are now out. And so this cross-governmental strategy, New Labour would either have to go back into the era of New Labour version 1.0, when it was under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and actually pick up on this idea of joined up problems, joined up thinking, joined up solutions as a way to find some successes, or get creative with where the market is now, or look to other jurisdictions in terms of what they're doing. That's one of the things they're going to be doing. Secondly, they're going to abolish Section 21 of this no fault eviction. It's Section 21 of the Housing Act 1988. By abolishing this no fault eviction means that it's bringing more security to renters. And so landlords just can't throw people out because they feel like it. So that's going to bring another element of protection and security to renters. And there are baby boomers within that, those who face homelessness. And then the third thing that they are planning is to revise this, the benefits system with regards to universal credit, and look at it in a way whereby older people in particular who are wanting to work, experiencing the difficulty of finding a job in the context of ageism. So they're going to be looking at universal credit to see how they can alleviate poverty and at the same time, obviously, encourage older people who are looking for work to try and find work. So there's some of the things that the Labour government is doing. Now, if we look at Australia, so Australia Australia and Canada and Japan, they've all got similar kind of schemes, and the whole idea is to build affordable housing. And or what they're doing is looking at housing options for seniors. So in Canada, they've got this National Housing Federation. The idea is to build affordable housing, but also to have a quota within that for senior living. Or you've got options whereby governments are looking at improving adult social care. That's something that this Labour government is going to have to be taking on. But governments right around the world, given that we've got this, it's not a problem. It's wonderful on the one hand that we are living longer, but in terms of how are governments going to afford the longevity arc in populations that's going to be for generations, every government has to face this. So they're going to have to look at dealing with adult social care. They're going to have to look at the NHS, for example, or the healthcare costs. They're going to have to look at housing. They're going to have to look at transport. It's a 360 renovation that's needed from government leaders. So there's some of the suggestions with regards to Australia. They want to improve their care services. Japan, the same thing. So there's some of the ideas that governments have with regards to taking on the responsibility, the shared responsibility, the shared reality of what it means to age, what it means to find yourself in an emotionally, but also a physically fragile position in terms of lack of housing security. It's going to take this multifaceted approach. You know, I'm going to keep my eye open in terms of the Labour government and this new cross-governmental approach, because it's going to take a multidisciplinary approach to solving this problem. So if you're interested in another narrative that baby boomers are aiming to debunk, then watch this video up here, where I talk about and take you through the myth or the reality of this great transfer of wealth that us baby boomers are meant to be swimming in. And we can't wait to pass it on to our Gen X or millennials or Gen Z children or grandchildren. Until then, stay well. I'll see you on the next show. Bye bye.